Picture this. The biggest sporting event on the planet kicks off on American soil. Billions of people around the world are watching. Tens of thousands of fans are flooding the streets of Los Angeles. And the President of the United States is nowhere to be found. Not overseas, not on some urgent diplomatic mission. No, he is back in Washington watching fight sports. That is exactly what just happened. And if you think this is simply a matter of a packed schedule, you have not seen the full picture yet. Because behind this quiet boycott lies a much bigger story. A story about politics, fear, spectacle, and a country that seems to be doing everything it can to sabotage its own party. The 2026 FIFA World Cup is officially underway. For the first time in history, the tournament is being hosted across 3 nations: the United States, Canada, and Mexico. 48 countries competing, hundreds of thousands of fans arriving from every corner of the globe. An event that experts are calling, without hesitation, the largest sporting spectacle ever staged on American territory. And yet, from the very first day, something felt deeply off. The American president, the man who positioned himself as the architect of this tournament, the man who posed with the Jules Rimet Trophy in the Oval Office, the man who personally relocated the official draw ceremony to the Kennedy Center in Washington, that same man chose not to attend the United States opening match against Paraguay at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, California on June 13, 2026. Andrew Giuliani, executive director of the White House's Presidential World Cup Task Force, officially confirmed the absence in a statement to the British radio network TalkSport, saying, "He will not be attending the opening match. His schedule is full, but I know he will be engaged throughout the course of this World Cup." Then, with his characteristic grin, he added, "With him, always expect the unexpected." The unexpected. That is a fascinating way to describe the commander-in-chief's decision to skip the single most symbolically significant sporting moment of his presidency. But here is where things get genuinely interesting. While the United States was playing its opening match at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, the president was back at the White House hosting his own event. It was called UFC Freedom 250, billed as a dual celebration of his 80th birthday and the 250th anniversary of American independence. The event was held directly on the White House lawn in front of a hand-picked crowd, loyal, enthusiastic, predictable. Think about that contrast for a moment. On one side, hundreds of thousands of international soccer fans, a diverse global audience that has no obligation whatsoever to cheer for him. On the other, a home UFC event surrounded by his own supporters, a controlled atmosphere, cameras positioned exactly where he wants them. That is not schedule management, that is image management, that is risk management. To understand exactly why he made that call, you need to go back to what happened just 5 days earlier, Monday, June 8th, 2026, at Madison Square Garden. That night, the president traveled to New York to attend Game 3 of the NBA Finals between his beloved Knicks and the San Antonio Spurs. He became the first sitting American president in history to ever attend an NBA Finals game. His advisors called it a historic moment. His supporters on Fox News called it a demonstration of his passion for sports. Here is what actually happened. When his image appeared on the Jumbotron during the national anthem, Madison Square Garden erupted, not in applause, but in booing. Al Jazeera journalists at the scene described the crowd noise as deafening. CNN called it a flood of boos. And to add insult to injury, the Knicks lost the game 115-111, ending a 13-game consecutive playoff winning streak. His presence caused security lines stretching over 2 hours at the entrance. Bags were banned inside the arena. A massive security perimeter shut down several blocks around Madison Square Garden. And the outdoor watch parties that are a beloved tradition in New York during the finals were canceled entirely because of his attendance. De'Aaron Fox, the Spurs' star point guard, summed up the mood simply. The president's presence made everyone uncomfortable, and the Knicks lost. It is in that precise context that you have to read the president's absence from the World Cup opening match in Los Angeles. Because Los Angeles is not Madison Square Garden, it is something far more unpredictable. Los Angeles, a city that has organized mass protests against his immigration policies, a city where workers' unions had threatened strikes before the tournament even began. a city where more than 30 immigrant rights organizations staged demonstrations outside SoFi Stadium, demanding that ICE agents be banned from all World Cup venues. Restaurant workers, cooks, bartenders, people demanding better working conditions and protection from deportation raids. That was not friendly territory, and he knew it. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was sent in his place to represent the United States administration at the match. A symbolic gesture, without question, but not in the direction the White House was likely hoping for. Now, let us talk about what may have been the single most embarrassing moment of this entire World Cup so far. And it did not happen on the pitch. It did not happen in the stands. It happened at Miami International Airport. Omar Abdulkadir Artan, 34 years old, a Somali referee. He had been selected by FIFA to officiate matches at the 2026 World Cup, an extraordinary honor, a genuinely historic milestone for him and for his country. He was going to become the first Somali referee in history to oversee a World Cup match. He landed in Miami. He was held by American authorities for 11 hours, and then he was sent back home. United States Customs and Border Protection declared that he had been found inadmissible following a routine inspection. A senior Trump administration official later told NBC News, speaking on condition of anonymity, that Artan had been denied entry due to alleged connections to suspected members of terrorist organizations. No charges were filed, no evidence was made public, no appeal was possible. FIFA responded with calculated diplomatic restraint, stating in an official release, FIFA is not involved in the immigration processes of host countries, including visa decisions. As with previous FIFA events, it is the host government that ultimately determines who receives a visa and who is admitted into the country. In other words, not our problem. But here is what FIFA did not say. The United States had issued formal guarantees to FIFA years before the tournament was scheduled to begin. Written, binding commitments that eligible athletes, officials, and fans from all nations around the world would be able to participate in the event. Those guarantees were disregarded. The international backlash was immediate and sharp. The Council on American Islamic Relations publicly condemned the travel bans. Members of Congress went on record expressing their shame. New York City Mayor Zoran Mamdani issued a pointed statement. Soccer would not exist without immigrants. Immigrants play this sport and coach it. They work in the stadiums, they fill the seats, and they make celebrations like the World Cup possible in the first place. 6 players on the United States men's national team are immigrants. We will not allow ICE or anyone else to spread fear in our communities, especially not now. And while that statement was making headlines, Omar Artan was on a plane back to Mogadishu. What happened when he landed is, paradoxically, one of the most moving moments this tournament has produced. At Mogadishu's international airport, thousands of people were waiting for him, government officials bearing flowers, fans draped in Somalia's sky-blue national flag. He was lifted onto people's shoulders, cheered, celebrated like a national hero, not because he had refereed a World Cup match, but because he had become the living symbol of an injustice the entire world was watching unfold. Artan himself told the local press with quiet dignity, "What happened, happened. It was fate. I will be at the next World Cup." Class, resilience, grace under pressure, and American diplomacy conspicuously silent. But the Artan case is only the most visible tip of a far more troubling iceberg. Because well before the opening whistle blew, massive concerns were already casting a long shadow over the entire tournament. The travel restrictions imposed by the Trump administration affect or severely limit citizens of 39 countries, 39 nations, some of which have qualified teams in this World Cup, enthusiastic fans, legitimate football officials. Iranian athletes found themselves without American visas just days before the tournament began. Entire delegations faced total uncertainty up until the very last moment. Tom Homan, the White House's so-called border czar, attempted to reassure the public in a television interview, claiming that ICE's priority during the tournament would be national security, not immigration arrests. But when pressed directly on whether foreign visitors needed to worry about being detained by ICE inside stadiums, his response was deliberately vague. "We're focused on national security matters. That's what we're going to be focused on. That is not a guarantee. That is a non-answer, and the world noticed. Civil rights advocacy groups issued formal warnings describing a climate of fear that could deter fans from dozens of countries from making the trip at all. Over 120 organizations across the United States joined in a national travel advisory, urging visitors, immigrants, and people of color to be prepared for possible ICE action during the tournament. The American hotel industry, which had been banking on record-breaking revenue, began reporting booking numbers well below projections. Fans from countries affected by the travel restrictions canceled their trips out of caution. The biggest World Cup in history, the one that was supposed to be a triumph of American sports diplomacy, was already cracking before a single ball was kicked. And here is a detail that did not go unnoticed on social media or in the international press. During Mexico's opening match of the tournament, the American flag was booed by spectators inside the stadium, not the Mexican flag, not any other country's flag. The American flag, belonging to one of the three co-host nations, was booed at its own tournament. That is the scale of the damage we are looking at. Members of Congress did not hold back. One congressman, visibly emotional during remarks before the opening match, stated publicly, "I am embarrassed. I am ashamed that our government, the government of the United States, failed to live up to the moment. A Somali referee was turned away at our border. Iranian athletes were refused entry. This is not how things are supposed to work. I believe the vast majority of people in this country want to be welcoming. As a member of the United States Congress, I want to be welcoming. Unfortunately, Donald Trump does not." Strong words, words that echoed far beyond that room. Let us return now to the central question. Why did the president really avoid the opening match? The official answer, you already know. Busy schedule. UFC Freedom 250. His 80th birthday. The 250th anniversary of American independence. But here is the real answer, the one that the data and recent events paint clearly. Madison Square Garden cost him something, not politically, not officially, but psychologically. Being booed thunderously in his own hometown, in front of millions of television viewers, during an event he had specifically tried to turn into a personal moment of sporting glory, that leaves a mark. And Los Angeles on the night of June 13th, 2026, represented something far more threatening than MSG. An international soccer crowd from all over the world, with absolutely no reason to applaud him. Millions of Latino supporters directly and personally affected by his immigration policies. Labor unions that had threatened strikes. Protesters in the streets outside the stadium. An American flag already being booed in Mexico just hours earlier. The math was simple. Avoid the uncontrollable. At the White House with the UFC, he is on home turf. The crowd is loyal, the cameras are perfectly positioned, the narrative is under control, it is his bubble. Los Angeles, by contrast, is the unknown. And for this particular man, the unknown means a risk of an image that slips out of his hands. Look at the pattern. The first UFC event ever held on White House grounds. Discussions about installing a permanent fight structure on the presidential lawn. UFC evenings at Mar-a-Lago. Photos with champions. The spectacle. Always the spectacle. Image before substance every single time. And while all of this theater is playing out, the genuinely important diplomatic questions surrounding this World Cup remain unanswered. Why were the guarantees made to FIFA not honored? Who made the decision to deny Omar Artan entry? On what legal basis? With what evidence? Why were entire delegations from participating countries still sitting without American visas on the day the tournament opened? These are the questions that deserve real answers. The opening match between the United States and Paraguay was played without the president. The only goal of the game came from a Paraguay own goal by defender Damian Bobadilla. The United States won. The crowd at SoFi Stadium celebrated, but the political atmosphere surrounding the match dominated the headlines just as much as the result on the pitch, and that itself tells you everything you need to know. When the environment around a sporting event overwhelms the event itself, something has fundamentally gone wrong in its preparation. The 2026 World Cup was supposed to be a statement of openness, the first tournament to feature 48 teams, the first ever co-hosted by 3 nations, a celebration of global football's diversity stretched across an entire continent. a moment where the United States could present itself to the world as the welcoming, dynamic, generous nation it aspires to be. Instead, it is a tournament already defined by entry bans, a referee turned away at the airport after 11 hours of detention, angry labor unions, fans terrified of ICE arrests inside stadiums, hotel bookings in freefall, and a president absent from the most symbolically significant match of his country's modern sporting history. And he had staked so much on this moment. The photographs with FIFA President Gianni Infantino, who personally delivered the Jules Rimet trophy to the Oval Office. The joke about wanting to keep the trophy, the ticket issued in his name, row 1, seat 1, that was never used. The draw ceremony relocated to the Kennedy Center, FIFA presenting him with its inaugural Peace Award at that very event. Everything was carefully choreographed to make this World Cup the defining achievement of his presidency. But here is the hard truth. You can stage the draw. You can hold the trophy. You can collect the awards. You cannot control what the world actually sees. And what the world sees is a host nation that turned away a decorated African referee at the border. A host nation whose flag was booed inside a stadium belonging to its own co-hosting partner. A host nation whose president chose to watch combat sports on the White House lawn rather than stand beside his national team in front of 1 billion viewers. That is the real image of the early days of the 2026 World Cup. Not the goals, not the fans, not the celebration. It is the image of a country that had every opportunity to shine on the global stage and chose at every turn to look away. There is a profound irony buried in all of this. The World Cup may be the only event on Earth where the power of physical presence is absolute. Leaders from across the planet attend their country's matches as a matter of national duty. The Emir of Qatar was in his seat for the opening in 2022. Vladimir Putin was in the stands for Russia's opener in 2018. Showing up is a statement. It says, "My country is proud to be here, and so am I." That statement was never made. In its place, a Secretary of State standing in as a substitute, and a president back in Washington surrounded by carefully calibrated cameras, a hand-picked crowd, and a controlled spectacle. The stakes for American soccer itself are enormous, and they extend far beyond politics. This World Cup was always going to be a test of whether the United States had finally, truly arrived as a football nation. Major League Soccer has grown dramatically over the past decade. Lionel Messi's move to Inter Miami in 2023 transformed the league's global profile overnight and brought a new wave of serious attention to the American game. The United States men's national team arrived at this tournament with a roster that blends homegrown talent and the kind of naturalized immigrant origin players that Mayor Mamdani was referencing. Christian Pulisic, Ricardo Pepi, Yunus Musa, these are players who carry genuine global recognition, who compete at the highest levels of European club football. For American soccer, this World Cup was supposed to be the moment everything clicked. The platform, the audience, the talent, all aligned at once. Whether the political turbulence dims that moment or whether the team manages to transcend it will be one of the defining storylines of the weeks ahead. What makes the situation even more remarkable is that, by almost every objective measure, the tournament's organization has been impressive. The stadiums are world-class. The infrastructure is in place. The broadcast deals are historic. FIFA itself has reported that global viewership numbers for the opening days exceeded projections. The soccer is real. The excitement among fans who made it to the venues is real. The atmosphere inside those stadiums, when filled, is extraordinary. None of that erases the political dysfunction surrounding it, but it complicates the narrative in important ways. This is not a failed World Cup in the operational sense. It is a World Cup that arrived dragging behind it a political context that no sporting event was ever built to carry. And that, ultimately, may be the lasting lesson of the 2026 tournament, that you cannot fully separate sport from the political moment in which it lives. Countries that host the World Cup are not just renting out their stadiums. They are making a statement about who they are. South Africa in 2010 made a statement about resilience and transformation. Brazil in 2014 made a statement, however messy, about emergence and ambition. Qatar in 2022 made a statement about Gulf wealth, modernization, and deeply contested values. The United States in 2026, co-hosting with Canada and Mexico, had the chance to make a statement about the promise of the Americas, about the diversity and openness that defines this hemisphere at its best. What statement it is actually making right now is something the whole world is debating, and not entirely in the United States' favor.